101 with me. My name is Carrie Watson. Several of you were already in here, plus we have a newbie. Hi. And so today what we're going to do with budgeting is we're going to talk about how to kind of approach some of the work that, in my opinion, should be done prior to coming and spending money and being a buyer at a trade show. So let me get going. And what I thought we could do, or let me ask this, did anyone not get the slides that was interested in following along on your devices? Okay. So this is the 1 o'clock slide. So what I'd like to do kind of when I start a session like this is it's pretty heavy in jargon, if you will, pretty heavy in kind of vocabulary. And I just want to ensure that we're all kind of talking in the same words, because you might have some verbiage that's a little different than mine and so on. So starting with, when I use the word inventory, I mean like how much is inside the store that you own or will own really soon. There's a couple of different ways you can talk about inventory. Obviously, like it's the number of units in the store, it's the cost of all of that merchandise added up together, or it can even be the cost or the retail number all added up together. It's very, very, very normal for retailers and buyers and anybody in retail to talk about inventory in terms of cost dollars. And like I said, that's very normal. I have a tendency to talk about it in retail dollars because it's a little more startling. It's a little more like, oh wow, if we sell all of that, then that's how much money or revenue that we potentially have due for us. So inventory is what's inside the store, it's what you're managing, it's what you own in terms of merchandise. Sales are obviously like what you bring to the cash wrap, no big deal. There is a sales number, and Lightspeed's a little weird because they do discounting weird, but to me, sales is the cash price that customers pay for the merchandise. It's not the original price. It is what you and your customer have negotiated in order for them to pay for the merchandise that they're acquiring. So that's sales. To me, a budget is when you're coming to a trade show, when you're getting ready for an assortment, when you're getting ready to come and buy merchandise. It is the number of dollars you're going to spend in order to make all of those product dreams come true for you. So it's the total number of receipts, the total number of invoices you're going to receive during that time, the total amount of merchandise that you're going to buy. Most of the time, this is in cost dollars. That's pretty cool. So that's budget, right? Next up, you have purchase orders. Purchase orders are what you tell the brand you want to buy in order to spend money against your budget. Purchase orders are a commitment. Technically speaking, we were talking about this in the last session, but technically speaking, purchase orders are a contract between you and the brand that you're committing dollars, you're going to pay for that merchandise that you have on order with them. Again, talking about Shark Tank, like purchase orders, the sharks love it when you have purchase orders written against your product. Because a lot of brands can, if they have purchase orders written from retailers, like I said, it's a contract that should guarantee future payment. And in the bank size for the brand, they can almost leverage that and get capital in order to manufacture their goods. So that's why a lot of your brands will have, if you have the opportunity to modify or revise your POs, that's why they have cancellation penalizations if you cancel more than a certain amount, because I think it has a lot to do with that like sneaky back end of like their financing to banks and how they get through their factories and stuff. But anyway, purchase orders are basically like what we're committing our dollars to in the future. Now, purchase orders happen in two different time frames, if you will. What a lot of us are here to do right now are do pre-season orders. So pre-season is legitimately before the season happens. With a lot of boutiques, they're about 4 months before the season happens is when they do their pre-seasons. For some retailers, for some retailers, they do maybe 9 to 12 months in advance. So that's where, like, if you're buying from Patagonia, North Face, some of those really big brands, you're doing pre-season orders really early. And some of them are for fall 24 are already due. Like Viore was due 3 weeks ago if you're buying Viore for your store. So that's one type of purchase order, right? So we have a budget, which is our goal amount that we want to spend. It's kind of a strategy coming from us internally. You've got purchase orders, which help you spend your budget. Pre-season orders are done before the season. And then we have ASAP or at-once orders. So pre-season orders are designed to kind of take care of your like basic needs, if you will. Whereas ASAP orders are designed to do a handful of things. They're designed to be maybe some pieces of flair that you bring into the store a little bit closer to Christmas, let's say. Sometimes it's really hard to decide what the best color of something is going to be, or what the best price point with a gift is going to be. And so the beauty of like walking the floor right now at some trade shows is that you are legitimately like shopping for gifts right now for Christmas. And so if you know a little bit more about the colorway, the story, the marketing scheme that the store has, you can make that come alive if you reserve dollars in season or ASAP or at-once. And some brands operate in that capacity. They're like, I'm ready to do business today, let's go. A lot of smaller brands would do that. Sock brands are easy to work with, underwear brands, accessory brands, usually kind of like tchotchke type of stuff that's like kind of smaller and more affordable. But those are ASAPable. Another reason why people ASAP is like, maybe you did a pre-season on something that was really successful and you want to bring that merchandise back into the store again. So maybe you sold all of your women's mediums and you're like, wow, I'm already out of that. I know if I filled in that merchandise again, I am confident that I could sell through it again over the next month, the next 4 weeks. So when you have that version of an ASAP, then you're confident that you can sell through that merchandise at full price over the course of the next few months. So it's a lot of times with pre-season orders, since you're writing them so far in advance, there are benefits to writing pre-season orders. And some of those benefits are you get extra discounting on your purchase order, you get extra payment, weeks or months or days. And so the brand is kind of telling you, thank you for doing this for me. Here's a little discount and or a little bit of like operational help in order to get your pre-season orders in. Whereas ASAP orders have a tendency to be like 30-day or credit card terms. So if you're buying an ASAP, you need to be really confident that you can sell through that merchandise in order to pay the bill. So that's kind of the big difference between the two types of ordering. Who in the room has placed ASAP orders before, like for immediate shipment? I mean, I feel like most people do. And then who in the room has placed an order for 3 months or more in advance? And you try and reserve the product needs for that. So some of what can be really tricky with your pre-season orders is like, well, I think I know what I'm going to sell, but I'm not exactly confident in this either. And that's why our brands try to give us those operational dividends, if you will, in putting together that contract, that order for but it can be tricky. And with budgeting, we have pre-season orders, we have ASAP orders that go into our budget. And for the people that have to do budgeting 12 months in advance, how much am I going to reserve for pre-season versus how much am I going to reserve for ASAP? So it's like you almost have a pie, and how much of the pie am I going to take care of now, and how much of the pie do I want to purposely leave on the table so I can have leftovers in the season and like snack on it in the season while I'm doing that. So it's almost, it's different by category. Obviously, like there are, like a convenience store, dude, y'all, they're all ASAP. They're not placing pre-season orders by any means. They're all ASAP. They're all like account filled type of businesses. And what's nice about a convenience store is that they have those really fast turns, because it's like, oh, the Reese's are empty, the Gatorade's empty, so I'm gonna do an order for that, and then they come in. And I bet very rarely does a convenience store have expiration dates that they pass, right? Because they're turning and going through their stock levels so quickly. Questions about any of this so far? I covered a whole bunch all at once. We're good. Okay. So continuing with a few more definitions. I think I have a couple more. Yeah. So receipts are when a purchase order actually shows up at your store and it turns into a receipt. So a lot of point of sale systems will have the ability to put in a pending order, so you can tell what's on order in the future. You can assign it a ship date, especially if you're using Lightspeed, Retail Pro, Rick's, what else is out there? Heartland. There's a whole bunch of point of sale systems out there. But the majority of the ones that are worth a hoot, they have the ability for y'all to like create item numbers inside the point of sale, create a whole database, and create a purchase order, which says my computer's HP. So I have a pending order with HP, I'm going to receive it in 3 months, and I have 12 computers on order. And you would be able to view that in your point of sale, view that purchase order. So then when that order, let's fast forward 3 months, when that order actually comes in, then we have the ability, my receiving manager in the store can say, cool, the HP order came in, and it came in as expected, and boom, is the idea. They can say receive on that purchase order, and then that purchase order gets converted into inventory through the receiving metric. So it's not all that different from like, if you order something from Pottery Barn and you pay for it with a credit card and it comes in your house and you're like, oh, mentally, I know that I have something from Pottery Barn in my house right now. So it's just how the flow of merchandise happens. So receipts are when, some people call receipts like they give a customer, their customers, to me those are tickets, but there's a ton of different ways. So when receipts get converted, from a purchase order to receipts, they get converted to inventory, and then we have our whole cycle that starts over again, right? So we started with inventory, we're into inventory. So what we're all here for today is understanding like the differences between like, what is a budget? How can I budget better? And what is this word called like open to buy that I hear that's about? And open to buy, we're going to go through a really, really simple example of it, and I think it'll start to make a lot of sense. But open to buy is if you have a starting inventory today and you have an idea of what inventory you want to have in the future, what happens to your inventory that makes it go up and down between now and the future? What makes your inventory go up? Purchases. What makes your inventory go down? Sales. Perfect. So what happens between A and B, and if we have certain goals around where we want to end our inventory, then open to buy helps us plan for that in the future. So when all of these things work together, we have harmony. It feels really good. It's beautiful. We can listen to it. It's not like nails on the chalkboard. Or we have a really broken cog in the wheel. And if you've ever received a purchase order that you forgot about, oops. All of a sudden you have a $10,000 payable and you're like, oh shoot, I totally forgot about that and now my cash flow is going to change because it's due in 30 days. Or if like during COVID, for example, maybe you sold through everything you had in stock of something and you couldn't get more because your brand was out of it. So if you sell too much, if you sell too little, if you receive too much, if you receive too little, then the cog breaks in our machine that is retail. So open to buy feels really corporate. There's a picture of Mr. Office Space man on my screen. But it can feel really corporate. It can feel like, oh wow, sales forecasting and budgeting and like these revisions and terms, and it can feel super duper corporate for a small person. But overall, when we have a plan and a generic overview of how we want to approach all of this, we're really we're protecting ourselves from big, expensive mistakes in the future is really what we're doing. And by having a goal of what we want to do between now and the future, again, you're just protecting yourself. You're protecting your business from expensive financial mistakes. So I'm building a house. My husband and I are building a house right now. And my hope and my dream is that it turns out into something beautiful, quaint, something to my taste. And so in order to communicate this to our builder, it takes a plan. It takes a blueprint of some kind. And the last thing I want, if I have a big ranch-style house, because we're going to live about 45 minutes from here, but if we have a ranch-style house that goes this way, the last thing I want is a shotgun house that would go in Louisiana or in a townhome community. That's the last thing I want. I want something big, wide, and expansive that way, not long and deep and having a corridor that lasts forever, like in China. So when I communicate to our builder, to our GC, I communicate kind of in terms like this, it's a really simple floor plan. This person got a pencil and a ruler and they just drew, and then they got matte colors and then they just colored it, right? To me, to how my brain works, that works pretty good. But when I give this to my general contractor, they have to fill in some gaps in order for this plan to actually come into place. So the plan that the GC is going to have, it's going to have a lot more dimensions, it's going to have an electrical plan, plumbing plan, and I say these different levels of details and plans because we can have a general strategy of what we want in the store, but the devil's in the detail of how we unfold it. And what brand are we going to buy the most men's tops in? What brand are we going to buy the most, women's sneakers in or socks? And all of that takes strategy and planning that ultimately we have a vision and a strategy and a target customer in our store. And so how are we translating that into product? How are we translating that into a budget that makes sense for our clients and our shoppers in the store? I do a couple of different trade shows, kind of switching gears just as mentioned, but I do a few different trade show talks, and one of the common questions that came from a different trade show was planning future stock. What are the benefits of using an open to buy or a merchandise plan, and how is it different than just buying to sales? Because a lot of people just buy to sales. When you buy to sales, it is exactly what it is. You look at sales from last year and you're like, I think it could grow 5%. So I'm going to buy 5% of what I sold last year. What's really difficult about that is it's very it's very narrow-sighted, in my opinion. So when we buy to sales, it's almost saying that that you're just looking at one metric in order to make your dreams and your plans come true. The other question is like, what are the benefits, but what are the challenges of open-to-buy planning? And some of the challenges of open-to-buy planning are like, try as you may to forecast. We really don't know what's going to happen. And I think it was Dwight D. Eisenhower that said something to the extent of, following a plan is for the birds, but planning is necessary. So I think, in my opinion, what he meant by following the plan is for the birds, like the act of following the plan step by step by step by step perfectly is worthless, because inevitably somewhere in the crux of life within the plan, something's not going to go exactly perfect, right? But in the process of planning, you are kind of like going through each scenario, you're kind of understanding what it's like, and in your brain, you kind of have some plan Bs and plan Cs kind of inherently coming up in your brain. So that's the vibe of what a budget is, what open-to-buy is, what kind of idealizing where inventory is today and where do I want inventory to be in the future. Because I've had shops that I've helped in the past, I've had people say, you know what, we're burnt out. I want to have zero inventory in 3 months. They're not even going to sell the store. They're just going to sell everything in the store. They're going to sell all their inventory in the store, and then they're just going to close shop because it's kind of hard to sell a retail business. And
So hi everybody, we had a technical difficulty and my iPhone stopped filming at one point in time. So I just want to run through the rest of the presentation at my home office, running through the slides with you. So the next slide is really we're starting to look at open-to-buy and what does that flow of retail merchandise look like to get us in between point A and point B. And so we're looking at the starting inventory. We're going through sales and receipts. And like we already established earlier, sales make your inventory go down, whereas receipts make your inventory go up. So I want to walk you through a little example of what open-to-buy physically looks like, almost like borderline visceral experience. And so if we're starting with a stock of 10 units, then it looks a little something like this. As a kid, I had troll dolls, and I just think that they're kind of fun and quirky and kind of fun for today's example. All right, so you started with 10, and what happens when you sell 7? So obviously we take away 7 because we sold the troll dolls in exchange for money. And so now we just have 3 troll dolls left. Next up, the next day happens, we open up shop and UPS comes and we receive 3. So now we started at 3. So now we add in 3 because receipts make our inventory increase. So now we have a current stock of 6. And so what we just went through is this timeline of how inventory changes over time according to sales and receipts. You're not always that much in control of sales, but you're definitely in control of receipts. So we know we have 6 in stock because we started with 10, we sold 7, we received 3. And so that means that we have 6 currently. But what happens when we have an inventory goal in mind where we want to end the stock at a certain level because we know next month is Christmas and sales are going to be bigger than they were this month. And we want to have 15 in inventory instead of just 6. And so what is the amount of units of troll dolls that we need in order to get to 15 when I currently have 6 in stock, right? Well, that turns into 9 units. And take a moment, because this mental math that you just did to figure out the gap of how many you have today versus how many you want in the future, that gap is open to buy. So we had open spots for 9 additional units in order to get to the 15 inventory goal. So a version of what we just did, I have it in this bright, colorful slide right here. But this is what we just did. We just did the open to buy formula. We started with an inventory goal. We had a sales goal, we had markdowns, we had beginning inventory. And once you move them all around away from like timeline and then you move them around according to algebra rules, then in order to equal and end with open to buy, then you take your ending inventory goal plus what you do in sales plus any markdowns or freebies that you give away. And then you take away the beginning inventory that you started with. And then once you combine all of these things, you're left with the pink line of open to buy. When we start to have open to buy over the course of the season, then we have all of these starting metrics versus the ending metric. So really inventory is the one metric that we have a start and an end of. And whatever the difference between ending inventory and the gap that we establish between sales and receiving, then that's the amount that you want to buy in order to make your inventory dreams come true. A common misconception that I see with retailers is just the risk of buying to sales. We aren't really in control of what sales are. I mean, let's look at what happened during COVID. Like the shelves were completely empty for months because everybody bought canned tomatoes and toilet paper and milk and coffee creamer. And if we only ever bought to sales, then it would never keep up with the random increased demand at that one point in time. What happens when you think that you're buying to sales, but you actually have declining sales? Well, if you buy more than what you sell, then all of these extra receiving amounts over the course of time are going to build up. And you're going to end up looking more like a junk shop than a premium level retailer or boutique because you're not holding yourself accountable to 100% sell through over the course of the year. And so constantly, just like our garages, just like our makeup counters, just like our refrigerators, all of these things need the occasional clear out. And we do our own little clearance event inside of our personal dwellings. So all that I'm getting at is apply the same principles to your merchandise and make sure that you are getting 100% sell through as frequently as possible so you don't end up looking like a junk shop. So the goal, this is like this little vintage, thrift store is kind of the goal in between of what is too much versus too little. And this shop is nicely merchandised. It's very organized. It's very pleasing to the eye, and it's very easy to understand because they also have some color coding inside of their visual merchandising. So all of that to say is you can design how much you receive to have the store look like you want it to look like. And the amount of merchandise that you keep in the store influences the customer's shopping experience. So are you more like the overwhelming junk store where you just immediately want to turn around because you're scared that you're going to maybe hit something and break something and knock something over? Or are you going to that convenience store or the grocery store where the shelves are completely empty and you end up empty-handed there too because you just walk out because they don't have anything? So my big mission with retailers is to start designing the profits that you want in the store. Like I've said 3 million times, sales, you have a little bit of control over. You can do promotions to really make sales grow. But really designing your profits is really designing the amount of merchandise that you're receiving and the margins that you're building in to your margins, the profits that you're building into your margins. And so with margin, any higher margins, any higher markups that you can take are obviously the best, the preferred way of operations, because every dollar you sell, the higher margin you have, the more percentage of that product revenue goes toward or is available to go towards things other than the product's invoices. It can go towards payroll. It can go towards rent, utilities, and maybe even if you're the shop owner, then maybe it can go into your pocket as a profit. Next up is cash flow. And cash flow is how your revenues stack up against their expenses. And this is different than the P&L, and there's a million different reasons why, but that's a whole nother topic. But cash flow is pretty much your monthly summary of how revenue is performing against expenses. Hopefully revenue is larger than expenses. And if so, then you're going to have some cash profits that month and you're going to have easy cash flow. However, let's flip this on its side. If revenue is small, let's say that it's October, and revenue is small, but your expenses are large, then do you have a way to navigate through that cash crunch? Because your expenses are larger than your revenue, so you're spending more money than you're earning. And do you have enough cash reserves to dip into to get you through that little blip time where cash flow is really hard? Sell-through is a metric that most people just look at from season to date. And when we look at it season to date, it doesn't mean anything. And it never will mean anything because our brands want to see us before we have 100% sell-through on the season and they want us to buy the next season. So sell-through it needs to be a trailing metric, meaning like the last 3 months, the last 6 months, the last 12 months. I like looking at sell-through as the amount of sales at cost or cost of goods sold compared to your receipts at cost. And if you have sold 100% of everything that you've received at cost, then ideally you're able to pay all of the invoices of the items that you just bought and sold. But if let's say that you have only sold 50% of the amount of merchandise that you've received, then that's a really low sell-through. And that means that you're likely buying too much. Can you bring your receipts down and still keep sales where they're at? And if kind of the goal with sell-through is every 90 days, do you have 100% sell-through? Because if you sell everything in 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, then how many turns is that? It's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then something else magical happens because depending on your terms, many brands and wholesalers have 90-day terms if you are a longtime customer. Terms can go up to 120 days, but that starts to get really long. But anyway, so sell-through is a great metric, but I believe people are using it incorrectly and we need to use it from a trailing date range, if you will. And lastly is turn. And I've heard a few people talk turn in terms of return on investment as well. And when we're looking at turn, it is not like sell-through. With sell-through, we're making sure that we're receiving the right amount for the date range. Turn is sales, yes, but it's comparing that to how much inventory we keep in stock on average. And there's a lot that goes into figuring turn because it's designed to be a metric over the course of 12 months. So you need 12 months of average inventory at cost in order to figure this. Some point of sales do it correctly. Most of them do not. And turn it's just kind of a complicated metric because average inventory at cost is needed for it. But where ROI comes in with turn is if you sell through that inventory, then you should be able to pay the product invoices and be able to pay your operating expenses and even reinvest into the next realm, the next delivery of merchandise that you've designed to come into the store. And the more times that you turn, women's fast fashion stores can get up over 10 10 turns. And when I worked at Fossil, our Manhattan stores turned way more often than that because they were so small. But anyway, so turn is it's one of those metrics where you want your merchandise to turn quickly. A quick turn store is a bakery, is women's fast fashion. A slow turn store is maybe the nuts and bolts area at a hardware store or the junk store that we just saw. When you can tell, walking into a retailer, you can tell the type of turn that they have, how faster, if they have a fast turn or a slow turn. Because when you walk into a fast turn atmosphere, the sales staff is quirkier. They're a little bit more excited. There's more to do. There's likely more customers that are shopping. When you're in a slow turn environment, there is so much more inventory in relation to sales. There's so much more inventory that takes up all the room and all the space that the inventory is dusty. It looks like it's been sitting on that shelf for 3 years because it probably has been. And it's just a very dilapidated, lazy, sleepy type of environment. Whereas the store with high turns is much more exciting. There's constantly new deliveries and new merchandise being merchandised everywhere. I think of like that little section of Target when you go into the front of Target right by the shopping carts. I am disappointed when they don't have new stuff in that area. And I would hate for shoppers of my retail store to be disappointed because I didn't offer new products since the last time that they shopped with me, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months ago. So turn is definitely one of those things that you can manage and look at in terms of one of the KPIs or key performance indicators, as well as the other metrics that we looked at, sell-through, cash flow, margin. But you can design these metrics based on what you think your sales are going to be. Sales are not that hard to predict. You're usually within 5 to 10% of your sales metrics. You can design your inventory, right? You can control how much you keep. You can be either a minimalistic type of merchant, or you can be a overzealous merchant that might be borderline hoarding, right? Like you can design how much inventory that you have in relation to sales, so how much inventory you keep. So you can design your turn. You are in control of how much you're receiving. So you can control your sell-through metrics. Margin is a result of how much inventory you keep and how much inventory you bought. So the more inventory that you buy, the more inventory that you keep, you typically have a lower margin over time. Well, it's actually a little bit 50-50. Some people just never go on sale. And so the merchandise never has an opportunity to have a low margin because the shop owners decide to never mark it down, right? But what is happening in the background is inventory is growing because you're not clearancing. So inventory is growing in that aspect. And then you might even start investing in secondary locations or storage units, or you feel the need, and I don't know how many times I've heard this, but you feel the need to actually expand the store floor print and expand the square footage of the sales floor and invest in a really super expensive construction project that's not going to break even. It would be way cheaper for you to actually sell the outstanding merchandise and not have a secondary storage facility. It's way cheaper to just sell it rather than to create an environment where you keep it all the time. So anyway, all of that to say, we're in control as retailers. We're in control of the receipts. If you need help, I'm happy to help. This is what I do for a living. I'm an open to buy consultant for specialty retailers. I was at the Austin Traffic Show this past November. And I'm just happy to be a resource for folks that want to learn more about buying, more about increasing their margins, their turns, and just managing the operations of their buy a little bit more closely. So my name's Carrie Watson, and thank you for joining